Hey everybody, this is Ryan with Rigs of Death Metal. Today my guest is Peter of the band Hath. What's up?
What's up, dude?
Oh, hanging in there. Well, man, I've been trying to delve and kind of deep dive a little bit more into the band lately. I'm a huge fan. I saw Keith Marrow share the most recent album. I don't know, like a month or two ago, and it's been on steady rotation ever since.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's there's plenty of newer current bands that I love. Which a lot of them are kind of like doing the retro sort of thing, which is sick. You guys are one of the few out there that I feel like is doing a cool, modern, trying to do something a little bit different, trying to kind of progress a little bit. Um, and I don't mean progressive, but you get what I'm saying. Just trying
Yep.
to mix it up a bit. And the
Yep.
production sounds amazing too. Who did you guys record with on this?
So my drummer, AJ, uh, he has his own studio and he does pretty much all of our production except for mastering. So
Okay.
we did all the drums, all the guitars, vocals, everything at his place. He mixed it. I think he shopped out just little things like drum edits. We did all the reamping, was all him. And then we sent it out to Alan Duchess at West Side for mastering.
Okay.
But we try and be like as DIY and as in-house as we can.
Right. At least for money's sake, if nothing else, right?
Yeah, death metal pays the bills for everybody's. So like let's keep it a little bit more in-house.
Oh, sure. Which, man, it always seems like such a good practice too, to at least get some kind of second pair of ears on something. And like they always say, ideally you want each step to be done differently, like tracking or pre-pro and then mixing somebody else, mastering somebody else. But at the very least, do change it up at the mastering process. Which
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure everything I've recorded, it was kind of done like that too. Like phase one is everything done here, and then send it off to master to somebody else. But
Yeah, and we're really lucky that AJ is like so invested and so passionate in that, because he can actually talk to someone like Alan or another mixing or mastering engineer and actually give them what they want. Like if
nice.
it was left to us, like if AJ was the mixing guy and wasn't involved in the band at all, and we had to provide notes, I'd be like, I don't know why it sounds bad, but it sounds not good. Can you make it sound better? Where AJ will jump in and he'll be like, yeah, something around like 1600 hertz just sounds weird. Can we just like dip it a little bit? It's a little sharp up around like 3200. I'm like, bless you, AJ.
Yeah. I'm trying to get into that more and trying to wrap my head more around dialing in specific frequencies and compression and all this stuff. I'm trying to learn, and
Yeah, same.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, like I've just started picking up like what like each band on an 8-band EQ actually translates to.
Hmm.
And I feel like a door has been opened in some ways. I'm like, wow, my Kemper profiles or my like little demo mixes don't sound like absolute ass anymore. Like I can actually hear what's going on and everything's not getting crowded in the low end.
Yeah.
And I know what crowded in the low end means now. And he's like, yeah, you know like step 1 of 1,000. Like, sweet, I'm on my way.
Yeah. Some kind of progress. I still find myself leaning heavy on like presets for EQ plugins and just try at least as a foundation. And
Yep.
I have to like isolate frequency bands and hear what they're doing still. But I mean, I guess that, it's like training wheels. You gotta start somewhere.
Yeah. And I mean, if you can get I feel like if you can get yourself to at least a competent enough level where you can self-diagnose to a point and then get that to a point to hand it off to someone who actually knows what you're doing, you've just saved everyone like a week's worth of headache.
Sure, absolutely. As a fellow Kemper guy, are you using a lot of like kind of post EQ within the unit, or just like whenever you're tracking and writing?
So I have a terrible answer. I don't know, because I'm constantly experimenting with it, and
Sure.
developing my own profiles is only something I've recently started getting into.
Mhm.
The profile I use pretty much for all of our live stuff is a blend of amps that, from when we were recording our last album. So like AJ dialed this thing in, or these amps in. He set up all the mics. He was like, okay, this is going to be the album tone. And I was like, okay, I'm going to steal this, and this is going to be my sound now. And it's been that for like 3 years or something like
Nice.
that. And I've only gotten to the point now where I'm like, okay, I should know more about this. Let me see if I can figure out alternatives, or can I recreate this? And so now I'm experimenting with, the EQ before the preamp, or what can you get in the amp profile EQ versus like the post, or like some of those like high and low pass filters that they build into like the cab blocks, or using different
Mhm.
cab IRs. And any day I feel like I'm making a little bit of progress, I figure something else out that feels like I reset everything. I'm like
Sure.
one step forward, two steps back anytime I dive into it.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, probably more post EQ at this point.
Gotcha. Uh, I guess kind of like the sweet spot as far as like tweaking and recording with the Kemper for me. Um, I leave like the EQ and the amp block. I pretty much leave it alone.
Mhm.
I just try to find profiles that are pretty close to what I'm looking for anyway. Because I feel like it's like it's trying to guess what the amp would sound like if you're turning the mid knob or whatever, and I don't like that as much. I feel like trying to do EQ like in your DAW would probably work a little bit better.
Yeah.
But in the cab block, no, I'm sorry, in the output section, I do a basic high and low cut, just to kind of make it sound like more realistic.
Yep.
Like lop off the super hi-fi, real kind of shrill, airy high end, and then the more subby, loose kind of lows, and put it in like guitar frequencies.
Yeah, I just discovered that output filter like 2 weeks ago. I'm like, what? Why have I been dialing this into every single EQ block? I could just set it and forget it.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. Um, which I was in the Helix stuff before the Kemper, and kind of messed with some of the global EQs on there, and learned a couple things I was able to carry over. I very gradually stepped from like all analog and just pedals, and little by little added like, what did I get first? I think like the HX effects,
Mhm.
and use that as like a mothership kind of thing for my rig. And as I got more comfortable with it, got an HX stomp, and next thing you knew, I sold my tube head and bought a Kemper and just went full in on it.
Yeah, I
And
had that. I had that kind of experience with the Pod HD line. Like
yeah,
when that came out, I was like, okay. Yeah, I was I was playing through a PV Triple X for years. And that thing weighs 100 pounds on a good day. Super fickle to like figure out a good EQ that doesn't just like blow up a room. And then I got this Pod HD. I'm like, okay, I'm going full digital. I'm gonna do the power amp block. I'm gonna get like the cool rack mount, tons of lights. I'm gonna figure it all out. And I was so unprepared for it. I was it was like, trying to teach a monkey like calculus. I was like, what do you mean I can have two unique like amp lines and blending amps and microphone placements and cab placements, and now I got to EQ everything? It's like, I just want to throw an overdrive in front of something and have it sound good. And I mean, compared to the Helix line, the HD line for the time was good, but I don't know. In retrospect, I was like, okay, it was a good first step. It definitely wasn't
Yeah,
there yet. Like,
sure.
and if I remember right, it came out either just before or at like the same time as the first Axe FX, and it was like night and day difference between the
Did
two.
it really? Damn.
It was within like I feel like a year or two. It was very
Huh.
close.
Well, at that point, it almost makes it feel like the Equate or Great Value version of the Axe FX. If
Yeah,
you
and
know,
I remember going to buy it, and the rack I think was like $500 or $600.
damn,
So like for what you got, amazing deal,
sure.
amazing like starter unit to figure out modeling and all that. Versus like the Axe FX was like 1,500, 2,000.
Yeah.
So I was definitely the poor kid with the discount Axe FX.
At the time, I absolutely would have been too. I gigged with a Spider 3 half stack for at least a
I
couple
remember
of years.
those.
I remember. Yeah, that was that was my first like real amp. Like
Yep.
graduating from the little Fender combo thing that came with my Squire.
Yep. Yep.
Hey, it was cool for a long time for what it was. Is like
Yeah. I
it's a
I was looking at what was it? The Line 6 Vendetta line, I think it was called.
oh, the Veda.
Veda, that's what it was.
I
Uh
still kind of want one. I don't know why.
we my first band, we played like a VFW show probably like 2008, 2009, somewhere around then. And Malignancy was the headliner.
Yeah.
And their guitarist was like, I don't know if he still is, but he was a Line 6 guy for years. Anytime I saw him, he had a big Line 6 either rack rig or head rig. And I was like, okay, he's got one. They must be good. And anytime I told someone like, oh yeah, I'm looking at like the Line 6 head, I got like the dirty look, like solid state, like digital head. What? Just get a 5150, get a PV, get a Mesa. I'm like, no, but he thinks it's good and it's got all these effects built in. They're like,
Sure.
don't do that.
Man, I see a lot of stuff with Mortician over the last couple years. Dude, Roger's still rocking like line 6 heads. Um like
Yeah.
it for a certain kind of tone, it actually works pretty well. And like the
Oh
Devourman
yeah.
guys, I've seen them with them.
Yep. The old Suffocation albums. Oh, actually, I think until recently, Hobbs was still using like an old, like early '90s Ampeg solid state head,
Hmm.
like a super like boomy scoop tone.
Yeah,
But like that's what it was. Like you just worked with what you had. Um,
sure.
and I feel like in a lot of ways that pendulum is swinging back, where like for us, Frank, our singer and guitarist, he doesn't like use a real head for anything. Like he's got a PV 3120 that he brings out for shows, and he only uses the power amp on it.
Hmm.
His whole tone comes from um, like a death metal pedal, an overdrive, and then he's got like I think a chorus and a reverb pedal, a chorus and a reverb pedal, and that's his whole thing. Like he can roll up with this little pedal board,
Huh.
a few cables, and that's his tone. And prior to that, he was using a Line 6 board. It wasn't the HD line. It was like the one before that, like
Hmm.
XT Live or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And when he got it, we were all like, "This thing's looking pretty old already." Like, you sure? He's like, "Luke LeMay uses it live. It's good enough for Gorga. It's good enough for me." I'm like, "Yeah, you're not wrong."
Yeah. Um I think it was Jack Owens, I think, was rolling with some of the like line 6 floorboard units like way after they were not the hip thing anymore. And he like
Yep.
he had like the 300-watt crate heads, those solid state ones. I can't remember the model. And he would just use them as a power amp for this little like floor pod or whatever it was. So yeah, a lot of that digital stuff. it can go a long way.
Mhm.
Especially if you're just going for like the like super uber brutal, crazy high wall of distortion metal tone.
Right. And
Um,
like if you know a little bit on how to like wrangle that and dial it in,
yeah,
like don't turn the gain up to 10, turn it up to like noon.
yeah,
Turn down the bass a little bit, turn up the mids a little bit, and you'll have a great tone. Like
yeah,
there's not really much more you need to do if you just want a good rhythm tone.
sure. Um, with that said, I know you've got the that's based on the name Badlander. I know you got the
Yep.
Badlander there. You got the Kemper. Is the Kemper like exclusive, like live rig, and Badlander's like kind of the home studio thing, or vice versa, or mix it up?
Yeah, at this point, Kemper is mostly live. So playing live, 100% Kemper. Practicing for a show at home, probably playing through the Kemper. Uh, just because like I've got everything dialed in so easily with that. And if I change it up at all, it's like, okay, which button do I have to press for the solo channel, the clean channel? I just want it like muscle memory. Don't even have to think about it. And then home, the Badlander's been my go-to for like a year, 2 years now. And only in the last year, I've like started getting back into pedals and trying to figure out like cool tones um, for the purpose of putting them in the Kemper.
Right.
Uh, so it's like a little bit of both at home, but that Badlander is, in my opinion, way too nice to like bring out to a dingy show. I've had too many amps like where something spilled on it or someone, like you got to push the gear off to the side and then a pit opens up and someone elbows it and
uh,
breaks your volume pot. And no, this is staying at home.
yeah, yeah, totally get it. Um, I played enough like crust punk living room shows to where I don't know if I'd ever feel comfortable gigging with like any of the really expensive floorboard units, like the Quad Cortex or something like
Yep.
as cool as it is. I don't think I'd get one unless I was 100% sure I'd never play a VFW hall or living room again. Um, or maybe just was exclusively doing studio stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just where are they? $1,500 or $1,800. I think they've fluctuated, but that's a lot of money to put on the floor.
Yeah. And I mean, that's just starting. If you're not going into like a house PA or something like that, you got to have some sort of power amp.
Yeah.
So, you get those little Seymour Duncan solid state ones. That's $400. You got a
Right.
real amp you're running into. That's however much that amp is. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. And at least with the Kemper, like my sort of like live show philosophy is as simple as possible. I want
Yeah.
the fewest number of cables, the fewest like points of failure that could go wrong. So if like we're playing a show and one of my patch cables on a pedal board goes bad, I don't want to spend 15 minutes diagnosing it or figuring out how to work around it. If we have 5 minutes to get on and off stage between a set, I just want to like throw the case lids on it and just let's go.
Absolutely. Um, yeah, those changeovers can be pretty brutal sometimes. I remember, I think one of the worst ones I ever did was my old band. We opened up for Static X, and I think there were 7 bands total on the bill, including us. So we were backlining, so we were like out to the monitors, pretty much. Like had no room to move around at all.
Yep.
And yeah, their tour manager, he was a real dick. So it's like it felt like we barely hitting the last note, and they're like practically ready to kick our stuff off the stage. Like people I don't know were grabbing my stuff. I'm like, who are you? Am I getting robbed? Like,
Yeah.
like so yeah. If I were to gig out now, I would try to. It's the same thing. Just whatever I can like literally throw together and wheel off within like under a minute.
Yep.
Which I feel like we should make as a very important note to some younger bands starting off. Don't be the local band that has
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you're running a giant pedalboard of doom 4 cable method into your full stack, and you have a drummer that has like the giant,
The big
rack.
rack kit.
Yeah.
It's 2 racks put together. You need 4 people to take the whole thing off.
It's like, oh, it'll save me so much time setting up, dude.
Yeah, and to anyone who's just starting out shows, any drummers specifically just starting out shows, take your cymbals off stage. That is the one thing that like triggers us as a band. If we see you do that, we will not want to work with you again.
Yeah.
Just get everything off. Take your cymbals can get off the stands off stage. You'll be good to go. We'll be friends.
And if you've really got your shit together and you have like a rack, like your own rack that has like your own in-ear monitor system, and like you literally all you need is like to plug in a loom real fast and you're in and out. Like if you're that organized, which not many people are, that's cool. If you don't have your shit ready to where you can tear down in under 5 minutes, then don't do it. Like, because whatever little rinky dink bar you're playing at where it's got, I don't know, 60-year-old Ted working sound and doesn't even know what the fucking XFX is, probably ought to go for something a little simpler, a little bit more self-contained. You know?
I mean, if you want the $10,000 rack rig because you like gear and you think it's awesome, that's great. But like, do dry rehearsal runs at your practice, like setting it up, breaking it down, because for $100 a night, like no one cares if you've got a $10,000 rig or a $200 combo amp. It's all getting mic'd up.
Yep. I just pictured like a singer standing by with like a stopwatch trying to time everybody.
No, I mean it's a real thing. Like I've seen it posted in like online threads and stuff like that. Like, I'm playing my first show. Like, what should I do to like get ready? And I've seen people suggest like practice setting up and tearing down as fast as possible. If you've got a side stage where you can start plugging cables in or getting your boards ready, do it there and just run up real quick and just plug in and go. And I wish that's something someone told me when I was like 18. I was like, damn, at 35, like it's been, I think I waited a little too long to hear that, but it's very true. I've seen it go wrong way too many times.
Yeah. I remember there were at least a couple times that I had to put kind of my pedal board almost back together because I was in such a hurry trying to clear out. Like stuff was getting thrown in cases. I would just grab my board, cables, didn't unplug anything except for the power supply and from the amp. The board was still plugged up, and I would just toss in my bag, zip it up. I'm like, I'll straighten it out later. I just gotta get out of here. And it's like I open it up, and it's just like a big pile of like nothing is Velcroed anymore.
Yep.
Everything's just in complete disarray. But
yeah, that's like the back of my Kemper case after every set. It's just like a rat's nest of cables and everything's tied up and knotted. I'm like, all right, well, here goes the rest of the show for me.
What I know you've been favoring the Jackson WR7s a lot lately. Mm-hmm. Is that become just like your go-to staple for live shows and everything now, or do you still mix it up with a couple of the others?
Yeah, that like charcoal black one on the wall behind me, that's been my standard like live guitar for like 3 years now, 4 years now. And before that, I was mostly playing a Strandberg Bowden, and like love the guitar, plays great, feels great, sounds great. but we were playing a show. We got invited to be like a local opener for Nile when they came through Philly, and that was the 7-string I had. I didn't have any other 7-strings, and so that's what I used. And we saw the live photos after that, and I was like, I am way too big a person to be playing this guitar live. I need to figure something out. And I have like a real soft spot for like really extreme and weird shaped guitars. So the production line Warriors, I think, were out for a little bit by then, probably a year or two. And I like offhand mentioned it one day to my wife, and she was like, all right, Christmas idea there. And so that Christmas, she was like, well, I know you're upset about the Bowden, so I got you this. I was like, okay, that's a much bigger guitar. This is way better. And I've just fallen in love with it.
Hell yeah. The Warrior's such a timeless, just awesome, perfect metal shape.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never seen anybody play one that didn't look like the coolest person ever.
Like it definitely fits a vibe. Like if I was playing in like Cynic, maybe the Warrior is not the way to go. Maybe the Bowden's the way to go. But if you're playing death metal, I mean, that's hard to beat.
I feel like Chuck Schuldiner kind of set the precedent that X-shaped guitars are always going to work for death metal.
Yeah.
And then guys like Luke LeMay and Dave Davidson just kind of perpetuating that forever onward.
Yeah. And I mean, 7-string V's are relatively recent. Otherwise, I'd have one of those too.
Right. I was watching some video reviews on some of those Jackson like X series 7-string V's. Those look pretty sick.
Mm-hmm.
But are you completely stock pickups like the signature Dave Davidson DiMarzio's in those?
Yep. Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised because like my kind of approach to any sort of like production line guitar, unless they really make an effort, like for a while Ibanez was putting like bare knuckle pickups in I think like their prestige lines or something like that.
Yeah.
Unless they're going the extra step like that, I'm like, okay, what am I going to put in this? But I was really pleasantly surprised with how those were voiced. They're super high output, maybe a little dark, but that can get EQ'd out no problem.
Sure. I remember watching videos when that came out because I was a huge Revocation fan for a long, long time, and not that I'm not now, but like I just wore it out. But yeah, I remember the promo stuff coming out. I'm talking about him voicing them specifically with like the EVH heads he uses, and I'm like, they pretty bright kind of tone. So I'm sure it is to try to compensate a little bit for that. And obviously he likes wide range of tones, likes doing the clean jazzy stuff too. Yep. Coil splits, all that stuff. So that, I mean, makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Who did the refinish? Your awesome like yellow crackle one.
That was Sims Custom Shop. So that started as a like the walnut finish, natural finish Warrior. Sweetwater had one for sale. It was like a showroom model that someone put a giant scratch in the face of it, and there was like a little ding on the back of the neck. So it was on a pretty nice discount, and I had this idea kind of bouncing around for a while, and I was trying to find a painter that would be willing and interested in doing it. So it kind of lined up all at the same time where this used Warrior popped up, snagged that really quick. Sims wrote me back. He was like, yeah, I'll do it. And like, I think I had the guitar for 3 days, then shipped it out. And like, it took a while. It took a long time. And only got it back 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
So it's been like a labor of love, like waiting for it and like planning out the hardware. So like I bought is it FU Tone
Yeah,
has like the colored screws and saddle blocks and stuff like that. So I swapped some of that out with like gold saddle screws, gold saddle blocks, gold locking screws up at the nut. So it has this just like lava crackle kind of theme through the whole thing.
that's sick. I love anything different. Um, it seems like you know, with death metal stuff, you see a lot of gloss black, satin black, or maybe like a black stain,
Mm-hmm.
which I mean are all cool. But I always get excited to see something just like really off kilter, really different. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
love,
like
love love to see that the crackle finishes have made a comeback in the last 2 3 years or something like that.
yeah, like BC. I think it was BC Rich really kind of led that charge 3 4 years ago. Who was it? I think Frozen Soul.
Hmm.
Them, uh, them, and there was another like like hype OSDM band, maybe 200 Stab Wounds or something like that. There were two bands playing like BC Rich guitars, and they had crackle finishes, and like everyone at the same time, I feel like was just like, "That's the sickest thing ever. That is so
Yeah,
fucking cool."
right.
And then Jackson came out with crackle lines on only their 6-string guitars. I was like, "Come on!" I was like holding out. I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
"Where's the 7-string crackles? Come on, come on!" And they didn't. They didn't drop one. So I was like, "All right, I have to do it myself."
Maybe they thought it was like, oh man, this must be like a hair metal resurgence, and they only like 6 strings, so
Yeah.
I don't know. I loved that black and red Rhodes that they put out there for a minute. I don't know if they
Hmm.
still make it or not. It was like a kind of like a Darth Maul sort of vibe
Yeah.
going on. Again,
Yeah.
Star Wars again. Well, kind of. Well, I guess there is one more gear question. Um, as far as the Kemper seems to be suiting you just fine for live shows. Is there anything, equipment wise, not just guitar gear, because new guitars are always sick.
Mhm.
Is there anything that's sort of like would be like a problem solver for you? Like maybe you want to integrate like a new wireless unit, or maybe you guys want a $10,000 in-ear monitor system, something like that.
Yeah, I'm good on guitars for the moment. I'm in the minority in the Hath camp where I want some sort of in-ear solution.
Mhm.
Um, but that is just like so prohibitively expensive and big for us. Not for everyone, specifically for us, where like yeah, just building a basic in-ear rig is a few $1,000s, but then it's another big thing to bring to a show. Um, and we try and do as much like minimally as we can. So like we don't have a big rack unit. We try and roll in with like 2x12s instead of 4x12s, because at this point they're just for stage sound. Everywhere we're playing, they have a PA where they're going to mic something, or they'll run an XLR into the Kemper, and that'll go through the house sound. Um, but when we're playing live, I've had I don't know how many shows at this point where monitors in the front of the stage just sound outright terrible. I'm asking the sound engineer to like change the EQ mid set because something wildly changed. Like we had a tour a month ago um, in January where in the middle of a set, it was like the treble and presence knobs on this one monitor just got cranked. I was like, I can't hear anything anymore. It's just high end.
Hmm.
Um, and where I stand on stage, I'm on AJ's right side. So I'm mostly hearing his crash, uh, China, and floor tom. And I really struggle to hear his hi hat and his snare. So like I'm used to listening for those beats and those little signals.
Sure.
And sometimes, depending on the room or the stage, it's just gone. And so, like, even just having a basic metronome playing in my ear, or just a little feed of like the backing track AJ's hearing, I would love that. And the rest of them are like, yeah, I don't need it. AJ's got his own little rig. He's like, that's what I need. So I'm not building a solution for you to build into my rig and make that bigger.
Right.
Their answer is get better.
Yeah. Sometimes you get outvoted. It is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any like gear companies, you know, make a small in-ear unit, like an all-in-one kind of unit, that would be amazing. I'd buy that. I'd pay double for it.
You'd almost feel like there'd have to be something at some point soon, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I hope so. I mean,
I feel like I've seen some that like you can use like an iPad or something as a mixer, and then everybody's just on like packs, something like that. I can't for the life of me remember the name of any of it, but maybe I'll do some research and share later. I don't know.
Yeah, I went down a rabbit hole while we were in the van. I was like looking up every YouTube video, every gear recommendation. There was probably like a 3-day window where like in my sleep I could wire up like a Behringer mixer to like the different wireless modules, just because I'd seen so much of it. And I couldn't find something that was either not $10,000 or didn't require some sort of like rolling rack case.
Gotcha. Well, have you ever got to play a live show using in-ears at all? Like for anybody at any? I've done it a couple of times, like for fill-in stuff. It's weird, man. It's really weird. I guess you would get used to it, and the pros would, I'm sure, outweigh the negatives. But just going off of a like personal experience, I found it weird. It felt insanely removed. Like I don't know. It sounds almost dumb and maybe a little pretentious or something to say you feel disconnected from the experience, what's going on, and the crowd, definitely from any kind of audience. But it literally just feels like you're off somewhere else, just playing along to a track and not actually performing.
Yeah, and I feel like there's definitely a level that once you get to it, it becomes non-negotiable. Like when you're playing, like the giant festival stages where there's 5 wedges across, a 50-60 foot wide stage, you're not going to hear anything. Like you're way better served having something self-service. And we're definitely not there. So I get that bit, but I also I get what you mean. I feel like my biggest struggle that I can think of right off the bat would be losing them. I move around a lot when we perform. So like I like to think about my role in the band beyond just playing the guitar. Like Frank's the front man. He can only move so much because he's singing and playing at the same time. And then me and Greg on either side of him, it's our job to kind of be like the hype man. And then AJ's tucked in the back. He's busy doing too many things at once anyway. So Greg and I, like, we're kind of the ones that have to interact with the crowd. We have to like get people into it. If they're not moving, we have to work harder. And that, for me, I feel like that usually means moving more. And I can't tell you how many different earplug companies I've tried out where it's like one good headbang and the plug's gone. Like you can watch it fly out into the crowd. I'm like, I feel like that's probably something I'm going to have to solve with like in-ears, because the way I move, it's just going to fly away.
Dumb question. Have you tried any with like the little like wraparound earpiece thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I've tried eargasms. They didn't fit my ears very well. They were either like too big or too small with the sizes.
Yeah.
Heroes, Hearos,
Hmm.
were pretty good in terms of like cutting volume but preserving tone.
Hmm.
But they didn't really work if I was moving. Like they would fly out pretty quickly. Oh, I don't have my keys on me. I found this company called Eros, Earos, where I keep them on my keychain, so I always have them on me. But they kind of
Yeah.
plug in and they turn, and that little turn kind of locks them in place really well.
Okay.
And I've done 2 runs now with them, like really whipping my head around, moving around a lot, and they stay in place. Like
Nice.
they've been really good so far.
I'll have to check them out. I I have the eargasm ones, and I keep them on my keychain, um, which I just wear them for shows. And I'm not uh, I'm not doing pits or anything like that, or windmilling, or two stepping or anything like that anymore. Just kind of hanging out. So they those work great for just like lowering the noise floor. Um, but yeah, I could imagine trying to actually like perform with those. I'd for sure lose them, no doubt about it.
Yeah, when I was using them too, I had the little like rubber band that connects them and kind of goes behind the back
Yeah.
of your head. And when they would pop out, I'd have one still in my ear and one out but connecting. It's just like whipping around live. I'm like, yeah, this is a problem I have to fix.
People looking like, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so any companies that might possibly be watching this, if inner monitor systems are your thing, you could have a new endorsee with Hath.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I mean, make the units smaller. Everyone's making everything smaller. Why can't in-ears be small too?
yeah, like wireless units used to exclusively be like a rack mountable thing, and now you have some that it's like a pedal
Yeah.
tuner.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the little Line 6 ones. They sit right on your pedal board. They've got, from what I've seen, 2 frequency bands, or some of them have 4 or 5 frequency bands, so that you can kind of play around if you're getting interference. And it's like 250, $300.
Yeah.
Like it's insanely cheap for what you're getting. Where 10 years ago that'd be like 5, 6, $700.
If you wanted to go like super budget, you even have some of those that it literally is just like a little, almost like a dongle that
Yeah.
plugs into your pedal, and then one plugs in your guitar, and they just kind of hang off there for like, I don't know, like 50, $70, something like that, maybe. If you're just super balling on a budget, local band, you're just tired of unplugging yourself.
Yeah, I've been looking at that Boss Katana Mini, the little dongle that
Yeah.
they dropped. Like if I'm sitting at home and I don't want to like plug in a bunch of
Yeah.
things and I just want to like practice to a metronome, or if like I want to warm up at a venue and it's really loud and I can't, you can't hear anything.
Yeah.
That seems like a perfect solution.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I kind of want one because I've got like a little, it's like the 112 Katana 50,
Hmm.
whatever, upstairs, and I'll sit at my dining room table and I'll practice. But I'm like, this is a first world problem if there ever was one. But
Yep.
so I'm practicing upstairs. I got the family around, and it's great. I'm not alienating myself down to like my little studio room down here. But sorry. But it's like, man, I'd love to just be sitting on the couch, relaxing, watching TV, and just practicing.
Yep.
But
Oh, that, yeah, 100% first world problem that I'm also suffering from. I looked
yeah,
at that Boss Katana Mini and I was like, what? There's no built-in metronome. It's got like 10 amps, 50 effects, a tuner. I'm like, but no metronome too.
it. Somebody posted a video recently about guitar players these days having almost like option paralysis, and
Hmm.
it's like we kind of are spoiled this day and age with guitar gear, and there's just always something coming out that's more compact and travel friendly, and they cram more and more into it, and the high end amps, like all the boutique stuff, like some of the Rev stuff,
Yeah.
like the amount of features that they cram into like their like flagship models is insane.
Yep.
It's like 4 channels with like multiple modes for each channel, and you can record direct with it, not even need a cab load or anything like that.
Yeah, it's got like a 2 notes torpedo out on
Yeah,
it for cab emulation. It's wild. It's
yeah,
it's super cool, but at the same time, yeah, I feel you where when I was coming up in high school, you know, I had a little like 10-watt amp that had a clean channel and an overdrive button. No foot
yeah.
switches, nothing else. And that was all I had for years. Probably until I got like well into freshman, sophomore year into college when I bought my first like tube amp. But that's all I knew. I had 2 guitars and that. Versus now it's like, a kid in high school for $100 can buy the newest like neural DSP plugin, and he's got way more options than I ever had for the first 10 years I was playing guitar.
Yeah. That kind of that makes me think of something. Do you think that the options, because how old are you?
36.
Okay, we're not too far apart. I'm 32, so we pretty much roughly had a lot of the same options as we were developing as guitar
Mhm.
players, and as we learned how to write songs. And it seems like there's a ton of progressive, genty, whatever kind of I've seen influencer core thrown around
Mhm.
for some of them. Like a lot of the Polyphia style kind of bands. That style of music and that style of guitar playing and the periphery kind of kids seems more prevalent now, and they write with such a wide variety of tones, and it almost feels like it's a byproduct of them having so many options and having VSTs or modelers where they have everything at their disposal. Whereas like, we kind of grew up with, at the most, you maybe had like a spider head or the pod stuff, and you could have a
Yep.
foot switch with a few different sounds. But we pretty much were used to 1 or 2 channels. You're like a rhythm tone and a lead tone, maybe an occasional kind of clean thing here and there. But we didn't mess with changing tones up nearly as often. So I wonder if that's I just wonder if it's a byproduct of what each generation is kind of growing up with having available versus just stylistically we've made up our minds like we don't really want a whole lot of textures, and we don't need an edge of breakup tone for a brutal death metal album or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I agree. At, yeah, I'll say I agree. And that's one thing I also agree. Like when I saw like Polyphia really blow up, I think it was when they dropped that song "Goat." Like I'd been aware of them. They
Yeah.
always had like really tight production, really great music videos, but they didn't quite like crack that mainstream
Yeah.
glass ceiling yet. And then Goat dropped, and it was like normal kids knew who Polyphia was. And I
Yeah.
was like, normal kids talking about 7 and 8 string guitars is like unheard of to me. And that's one moment. That's one of the moments where I'm like, oh, I'm the old guy in the room now. Like, okay, this generation shift has happened. But the first time I can recall something similar to that was when Guitar Hero dropped. I think it was Guitar Hero 3 that had Through the Fire and the Flames, that Dragon Force song.
probably. I can't remember either.
Yeah. Guitar Hero 2 or 3, 2006, we'll say.
Sure.
Because I was in freshman year of college, and everyone was trying to nail Through the Fire and the Flames, and there was a Buckethead song on there that was
Oh yeah.
ludicrous. And when I was in high school and like first getting into guitar and trying to learn how to play, if you didn't have a guitar teacher or you didn't know someone who was great who showed you how to do it, you either had to figure it out yourself, find a way to see it happen, or you just never learned it. So like when I was in high school, I had all these tapes from like UK guitar magazines or like Japanese guitar magazines. I don't even remember how I got them. Like the youth section of like Sam Goody or Tower Records or something like that. And that's kind of how I got exposed to a lot of different players and how I saw them playing. So like I didn't know what sweeping was, or like sweeping was this like top level 1% kind of thing that you had to work years and years in order to do. Because Jason Becker sweeps and he's like the best ever, and
Sure.
he's the best at sweeping. So if you want to sweep like Jason Becker, you have to be that good. And then Guitar Hero dropped and like YouTube came out at the same time. And then there was like a little kid somewhere in Asia playing the most insane like Canon in D solo I've ever seen. And I was like, what the hell? like they're the kids' perception of like what was possible in like 2007 was so wildly different from like 2002, 2003 when I started, just because, in my opinion, simply because of their access to seeing what was possible. And once like Dragon Force blew up, it was like all bets are off. Like sweeping's not special anymore. That's guitar. You know, if Stairway to Heaven is Guitar 101, sweeping is like Guitar 201.
It's funny you mentioned like the kid playing like Canon Rock or whatever.
Yeah.
Indie. Like I remember even seeing tabs for that cover in like Guitar World magazine and stuff. like yeah, that was I very clearly remember that time frame as well. And that definitely is because I remember being like a little kid and always wanting to, like, I thought playing like rock guitar was like the coolest thing ever. You would see it on TV, movies, music videos, etc. But the idea of actually learning to play and doing it didn't cross my mind until I was in my early teens.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just seems like it's not even reality. It's like wanting to be a millionaire at 5 years old. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just a thing you want in your head with no real connection to make it happen. And then I remember when I first started playing, like my first year, I didn't know about pedals yet.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would hear somebody like Drowning Pool was still relevant. and like there's so much wah on so much of their stuff. I was like, man, he must be really good. He must be really good to make the guitar sound like that. How does he do that?
Yeah.
And then later on I was like, oh, he sucks. He just presses on a pedal.
Yeah, like there were a few summers I worked at a local school of rock just as like an assistant to help some of the teachers out. And we were doing like a summer showcase. Like every month or two, the kids do a showcase that's got a theme, and they each take turns like playing in a band. They're each playing a song, or they're swapping instruments. And the kids at that time, I was probably 19, 20 years old, were so far ahead of me in terms of skill when I was the same age. Like if they were 14, they're starting to learn like jazz standards, and they're doing really good at it. And you always had a few kids who were like the exceptions where they were just naturally gifted in terms of music. They could pick up 2 drumsticks and hold a simple beat on the drums without ever taking a lesson. They could understand how a bass line worked without ever taking a bass lesson. Those kind of kids were like, they were 17, 18 years old and getting to the point already where they're like, I'm bored. Like, rock music's boring. It's not hard. Like, jazz is where it's at. I'm like, Jesus Christ, kid, you're going to be giving lessons like next summer. I'm going to get fired. Like, you are so far and above like what I'm capable of. And I think a lot of that is just the tools they had available to them when they had the most time to like just play, to just practice, you know.
Yeah,
when
makes sense.
When I was 14, 15, spending 6 hours a night just like playing pentatonic scales over and over, trying to learn eruption, trying to learn, you know, the solo to Crazy Train. You know, I'm working off of Guitar World tabs that are printed paper.
Yeah.
I'm like stopping and slowing down a cassette to like try and hear what's being played, but it's all pitch shifted and like my tuner broke, so my guitar wasn't in tune for like 6 months until I could get a new tuner. Versus like even back then, like 2008, 9, you know, modeling wasn't a thing yet, but they had YouTube. And you had people starting to give lessons on YouTube. So if you wanted to take a jazz lesson, you could get a really good jazz lesson in half an hour. Whereas I had to find a jazz guy and sit in a room with him.
I'm kind of waiting. It's funny. It's impressive how like the progression and everything of the younger generation. And I'm not going to be, you know, like the boomers before us that, you know, besmirch these kids with their damned YouTubes and it's like back in my day, I'd, you know, wore out the grooves on a vinyl record trying to learn how to play Thin Lizzy or whatever. I think it's sick. And more at the same time, it really makes me appreciate a handful of guitar players that came before us, like the guys that are just absolute phenoms. Of course, Eddie Van Halen, and then like Steve Vai, Zappa, and I've been on a big Michelangelo Badio kick lately. I still don't know if I've seen anybody that plays faster than that dude. Sean Lane, Jason Beck, like some of these guys, like what they were accomplishing for the time that they came out and got popular, it's insane. And there's arguably still nobody that's really rivaled them off some of their accomplishments, you know? It's crazy, which it kind of brings up the whole our guitar hero's dead argument or something like that. But
yeah, I don't think they're dead yet. I agree with you. Like I don't want to be a Grandpa Simpson yelling at clouds about, you know, these kids have 9 strings on a guitar and they only play the bottom 2. No, it's not my thing. Like, be mature about it. They're having fun. If it's not your thing, that's totally fine.
yeah.
And that sort of perspective, I think, has given me a much bigger appreciation for players like Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. Whereas when I was like 15, 16, I'd be like, they're just playing blues licks. It's all just blues and pentatonics and da 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 da. Where now I'm like, oh, they didn't have anyone to teach them. They just did it. And like, now that I have a way better musical vocabulary than I did when I was a teenager, like I could sit down and look at the tabs for like Little Wing, and I'm like, that is so fucking smart. Like the phrasing, the way it's moving between chords, that's so cool. And that extra level of like, they just did it. They didn't really have another person teaching them how to do it.
Yeah.
And where it's going, like I'm excited for it, but I'm also afraid I'm gonna become that like boomer grandpa because of how what I've seen so far has broken my brain. like someone like Felix Martin,
Oh yeah.
who's playing like those giant war guitars where he's like
Hmm.
playing piano on two guitar necks at the same time. Even Polyphia, like the level of just like dynamics with like the finger picking and sweeping and thumping and the different styles of rhythm they're incorporating. I'm just like, I don't know how to do that. I don't have the time to learn how to do that. It's really
Yeah.
cool you're able to do it, but it definitely gives me a feeling of like I feel like I'm being left behind in some ways. Like that's definitely the next generation going forward doing their thing.
Which it's almost been like a reoccurring topic on this show with just various guests. Like the bar for technicality and musical prowess keeps raising higher and higher, and there's so many metal bands, extreme metal bands that keeping right up along with keeping up with
Mhm.
it. Arcspire is kind of one of they're like this generation's like what for me in high school would have been like Necrophagus or something.
Yeah.
Like that's the bar. um, but it doesn't it feel like after I don't know if it's after a certain point that it starts to lose heaviness or what it is. It's like there's some of these acts like you mentioned the whole thumping on guitar.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it can't sound heavy, but I haven't heard it used in a context that made it sound heavy. And it doesn't have to be. That's cool. If it's just like, no, I just think it's a cool technique. I like throwing that sound in and have it on like a clean tone with compressor, yada yada. That's fine. But um, it's like I'm not wanting to hear progressive. I want to hear death metal. So at what point can we progress death metal and make it new and interesting without it losing the point?
Yeah.
Um, which is not blow smoke up your ass. That's one of the reasons why I like Hath is because it does some new stuff, like some of the textures and some of the just the really cool chords that I'm hearing. Um, it's not which you guys are very technically proficient, but it's not breakneck speeds where you can tell it's edited all to shit. And, it's not crazy tech death,
Yeah.
which can sometimes a little bit lose the point. Um,
Yeah. I totally get what you mean. And I think, and thank you, by the way.
yeah,
I think we have gotten to that point from a series of failures over our careers. So I've been playing with Frank and AJ in different bands now for at least 10 years at this point. No, maybe about 10 years. And they were playing together um, and in different bands also with Greg even before that. So we've had this like circle of revolving bands between the four of us for 15, maybe pushing 20 years, like going back to when they were in high school. And two of those bands, they were in a band called Hating Rain when they were in high school, which was like just super, super fast, super heavy, like Necrophagist and Black Dahlia kind of worship, um, with like some breakdowns here and there, but their breakdowns would be at like 230 BPM. So it's just like a thrash riff at that point.
sure.
Yeah, like AJ's thrash beats are like gravity blasts. Uh, and then after that band kind of ended, we started an instrumental tech death band called Ophidius. And the way that band wrote a lot of the music was primarily Guitar Pro first, and we would like purposely write above our belt. So it's like, okay, I can't play this right now, but it sounds really good in like crappy MIDI playback. So it'll sound even better with a real guitar. So I have to get to that point. And like we played a handful of shows. We dropped 2 EPs, and a lot of that, especially the shows, felt like work. Like it was an exercise in, can I play this guitar, can I play this song, and not, is this a good song necessarily? Whereas I think Hath has become much more of a reaction to that. And that's one thing AJ and Frank like check me on all the time. Like I love Tech Death, and I think Frank especially got a little burnt out on Ophidius. Whereas now, because he's the singer and because he's also a guitar player, he has to be able to play and sing at the same time. So like I'll write something, if I'm like feeling really techie one day, I might write a riff, send it over to him, or make like a 2-minute demo of what that might sound like in a song. And they'll come back and say, yeah, that's cool. It's not Hath. And so there's been this like kind of like education for me on how to write for Hath because of that. Like where mood, vibe, pacing, songwriting, those all take precedent way over, can this song be like hard to play?
Gotcha. Well, off that note, and I hate to validate any of like the boomer guitar players again, but do you think in order for a band to come out with something thoughtful, original, good, it stems from experience, like almost knocking on myself a little bit, but not really. Like a bedroom guitar player, self-producing stuff, putting stuff out, which is more and more the trend.
Mm-hmm.
The songs aren't going to be nearly as insightful or well thought out as a group of people that have been taking their music out and kind of wood shopping it in front of a crowd, and kind of being able to get that feedback.
I'd say yes 4 out of 5 times, because every
fair.
now and then you just get an absolute freak that is an amazing musician, amazing songwriter, and they do it all themselves. Like when Pliny came out, he was a teenager and he dropped those 3 EPs pretty quickly. And I remember the entire like guitar media landscape going crazy at the same time. Like he had Satriani shouting him out, he had Vi shouting him out, and a lot of what he was doing, compared to what I would expect from like a 17-year-old, his sound and playing was so far and above what I would expect to hear from like a teenager. It was just so mature. And if I remember right, he did that largely by himself. And like you're seeing it again today with like Matteo Mancuso, is like really young guy. I think he's in his early 20s, but he's like reinventing how to play guitar, because when he was growing up, the way I heard the story, his dad was like a jazz player who primarily was finger picking, and Matteo was like, okay, that's how you play guitar. And he's playing like shred lines and like prog fusion lines, all finger picking. And he's playing faster than like some of the fastest guys playing with a pick today, because he's got that extra dexterity. And so like on one hand, like the 1 out of 5, you've got those guys who their brains just work different. I am so jealous of it. But I think for a majority of bands, more specifically death metal, I think you have to have that kind of come up. Very, very few people I can think of who have like quote unquote made it, who are in full-time bands, or are not full-time but are in like recognized, celebrated bands. That is their first band. I think off the bat, the only one I can think of is like Dave Davidson and Revocation. Like he dropped Empire of the Obscene. I think he was 18, 19. So like I'll put him in the freak camp, the 1 out of 5.
Yeah,
Like
that's fair.
But like going back to Archspire, I think with their last album, they figured out the secret sauce for them. Where that album is still insanely technical. It is super hard to play most of those riffs, but there's so much of a songwriting element into it that the like super technicality, at least for me, doesn't become fatiguing the same way it has started happening with like other bands that I really love. I don't know if that's me getting older and just like my taste changing, or if it's because they're just progressing as songwriters like in such a way where it's something new and fresh to me in terms of tech death, and now everyone else has to catch up.
It is kind of cool when you do see a band come along. It kind of makes everybody else step their game up a tad. Which admittedly, Archspire, some of the stuff does go a little bit over my head. I think that's just more of a personal, you know what I mean? Like, just it speaks more as to where I'm at musically, I think, than anything.
Yeah.
And hopefully I get Dean on the show sometime too. And I'd love to have a conversation with him about it too. I saw a recent thing with him where he's talking about how they're kind of gradually, like little by little, being like less edited and to the grid on their recordings, and just kind of getting a different vibe. And I need to check out their newest release and kind of hear it for myself, because that sounds, I don't know, a little bit more appealing to me. Because it's kind of like and if anybody's watching these interviews chronologically, I literally just discussed this with my last one, but like one of the more recent Meshuggah records, they went from doing like the super digital thing to recording with real amps and doing like live room sessions where everybody's on headphones playing together at the same time, just cabs in different rooms and shit. Which I've done once before, and it's really cool and completely changes the overall vibe.
Yeah, I did it once with an old band to not great results. I've so much respect for anyone that can pull that off, because we were not ready for it.
I had the slight advantage because the band I was in was a thrash band, so it was really fast, but it wasn't like the most technical thing ever, you know. Way harder on the right hand than the left hand, you know.
Yeah.
And it was kind of weird. I was a little begrudging through the process because I wanted us all on a click, because it's the only way I knew how. Yep. And our drummer was not used to practicing metronome, which led to a lot of drum editing after the fact. But
I mean, I think that's a good callback to, we were talking about technology. I didn't play to a click and didn't really learn how to play to a metronome until I was well into my 20s. It was just something I didn't focus on as like when I was coming up playing guitar, because like the idea of a metronome was this little box that like sat next to where I was playing, and it had to be louder, or at least loud enough to hear over my amp. And I would rather hear the amp than a click. So I would just like play along to, if I had a song on CD that I knew how to play, and I would learn like scale shapes, and I would learn what the scales were, and I'd learn other people's solos, but I never I didn't develop those just like fundamental sort of like timing and lock in, the synchronization between the beat and your hands until way, way, way later than I care to admit. And I think that's something that on one hand is so much easier for younger musicians coming up now. And it's also like a hard and fast rule, especially for drummers. Like if you're a starting drummer, or you're in your first band and you're getting ready to go into a studio, I feel like a lot of studio engineers I've heard about will require not only you play to a click, but pre-production. Either do it yourself and provide the files, or you're coming in for pre-production. And that's how it starts. And
Yeah.
I never had that.
It's the times they are changing,
Mhm.
but and it's I guess me kind of getting into home recording and stuff like that. It was, I think I got my first like M Box and Pro Tools 9 around 2008 or 9,
Mhm.
something like that. It sounds about right. And very early on with that kind of stuff, and I didn't know what I was doing for. It was probably about 2014 after had my first kid and everything, had my first house. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna set up a room. I'm gonna get serious about this and try to learn what I'm doing. I'm still trying to learn what I'm doing, but I've learned a lot more of it than back then.
Oh yeah.
Which it's one more thing. The darn kids these days, all of like they all have DAWs. They all like us talking about learning about like frequency bands and stuff like that. There's probably tons of high school kids that they can carve out exactly where the guitars and bass and drums need to sit it, and they already know that. And
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. And
wild.
like,
That was off my radar. That was something like, yeah, I'll never do that. Like I'll just
yeah,
play.
like you had to, in like 2006, you had to not only know about the Andy Sneap forums, but like be really invested into figuring out what they were talking about, because there was no type of course to learn how to do that. It was just trial and error in a lot of ways. Versus now, like you've got Al Levy's URM, which AJ swears by. I haven't tried it because I'm intimidated, but like there's just so much availability to quality lessons and exposure to how like Mark Halpern, and like the Periphery guys, how they record and how they're dialing in everything. Or oh shoot, what's his name? He's a Fit for an Autopsy and
Will Putney,
Will Putney. Like he's got,
great producer.
yeah, like that sort of accessibility and insight into what they're doing didn't exist in the early 2000s. And I feel like when you're like 14 to 18 and you have like a passion for something, your brain is just so primed to be a sponge and just absorb everything. So like on their first and second attempts, they're learning all the rules that it'll take me 6 months to like really figure out.
Yeah. Well, man, Tom really kind of slipped by me on this one. Actually had a lot of fun with this with this conversation. We'll kind of bring this into the home stretch, though.
Sure.
I always kind of close these out with like a Mount Rushmore or top four death metal bands and or albums, whichever
Mm.
is easier.
Ooh. Uh, mm, Number one, in no particular order, Sludge Esoteric Malacology. It came out in 2018. No, yeah, 2018-ish. If you like Hath, you'll love Sludge. We get compared all the time. I have no problem getting compared to them because I'm a Sludge stan. And that album, I think, will be looked back on as like one of the most important death metal albums to come out uh, in that like 2010 to 2020 timeframe. The songwriting is just so good. It's so heavy, and they're doing something unique beyond just like the way they write. It's just really thematic, interesting music, and I love that. Second, I'm not gonna. It's not a death metal band. I'm gonna say Nevermore's This Godless Endeavor,
Nice.
because they sound like a death metal band without growling and without blast beats. They're
Okay.
the only band. They're like my favorite band. Not like they are my favorite band, but like Van Williams drumming. He's the only drummer I can think of that makes a band feel like a death metal band and doesn't rely on blast beats or straight double bass. And there's so much to take away from that album in terms of like songwriting and guitar playing. Like 7-string guitars, that's now the standard. Back in 2005 it wasn't. And Jeff's writing is like complicated and complex, but not impossible. Solos, that's another thing.
Yeah.
But but like the songwriting, it's just so heavy without having to rely on, weird time signatures or weird rhythms and super complicated riffing. It's just like the perfect package. Third album, I'm gonna go Adore by Numenorian.
Okay.
It came out in 2018, and again, it's another album I hope gets looked back on as like a really important. It's like kind of atmospheric black metal, but it is super thematic and emotional, and like I discovered it during like the COVID lockdowns. Maybe that's why it has just like this special place, because it is just so at times hopeless feeling. It is like distilled hopelessness and distilled emotion. And I haven't found another album since that kind of captures that.
hmm
And then I feel like I have to go. I have like my Spotify open on the side. I feel like I have to like put like an older album out there. It's all like newer. I think Ulcerate's the Destroyers of All.
Nice.
That was one of the last physical CDs I can remember purchasing, probably around 2008, 2009. And I remember popping it in my car. I didn't know anything about Ulcerate. I just had seen that album blowing up on like Blabbermouth and Metal Sucks, and it was on like everyone's list. This album you have to listen to. And so we had a really good record store near where I was living. They had it. It was in like a front display in the metal section. Grabbed it, paid, walked out, popped it in, and the first playthrough on that album, I have no idea how they made those noises. Like we call it the pterodactyl noise, is like the signature Ulcerate sort of like dissonant drone.
Okay.
Like in Burning Oceans, like it's just right in that first riff, and it was scary. Like the despair that they
Yeah.
put into that album, that like kind of changed in a way what I thought extreme metal could be, because it wasn't
Mm.
fast.
Right.
Like the drumming was fast, but like the songs weren't like breakneck death
Yeah.
metal speeds. There was so much just like atmosphere and so much going on, and it was only 3 guys, and they do it live, and it's like, how are you able to do this? Like the math just isn't working out for me.
Yeah. Which that's so ulcerate, and then also have you listened to Absent and Body?
No.
um sorry. It's got Scott Kelly, formerly of Neurosis. If you like Ulcerate, you ought to check them out. It's like that really dissonant kind of ambient sort of death metal meets like the darker kind of Godflesh style industrial.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Absent and Body is probably one of my favorite like it was just one album. I think it was like a one and done kind of thing. But it's
Just got it out of his system.
yeah. And I think it's sort of like a super group, like multiple people involved, but I can just remember Scott. Um if you like Ulcerate, to me, Absent Body is like just even more of that. Like you listen to it or watch one of the music videos, especially, it's like this is terrifying. I love it. Like it's so ugly and so just gloomy.
Mhm.
It's awesome. And not that I don't love like shreddy stuff. Like I still listen to like certain Ingve records, you know, but I feel like that kind of stuff where kind of like what we talked about before, like certain chord choices and arpeggiating like really dissonant chords and getting cool like layers and textures in there, um, or just better songwriting in general, is just where I lean more towards as the years go by. You know,
Nice.
as a
Absent
as
and Body.
yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna remember
definitely
this.
got to check that one out. But let me see, was that four? I
That's
think
four.
okay.
I'll give you a fifth.
Well, hell yeah, man. Dude, I appreciate you coming on here. I've been super stoked for this one, and um, yeah, sorry the time slipped away from us. I hope I wasn't
No,
holding you
it's
up for
all good.
anything.
I had a blast. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, and I don't know, maybe we'll do this around the next album cycle or something too. Who knows? But
Yep, we just got to finish writing it.
yeah, there you go. But yeah, everybody, make sure I'll include links down below. Go follow Hath. Um, no bullshit. Definitely one of my like favorite acts to come out and like or that I've found over the last few years. But yeah, anything you want to plug real quick before we get off here, or like tours coming up or anything?
No, I mean, you did a great job plugging us. We're kind of locking down this year to finish the next album. We need to stop being busy and actually focus on this. So hopefully before the end of 2024, we'll have something to share, or at least some news.
Nice. Well, as a fan, I'm looking forward to it, man. But yep. With all that said, thank you all for tuning in, and Pete, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, man.
Cool. See you all later.